There, and mothers, you can attest to this, there is not a lot of room in the womb. Correct? Right? I mean, basically, particularly, I see some of you already smiling, right? You know, particularly when that baby gets to 8 to 9 months, there's not a lot of room in there for anything but a baby. There's not a lot of room in the womb. There's also not a lot of room in the tomb, in a casket. I mean, sometimes we add little things in before they close the casket. A golf club. I saw somebody break a fishing rod one time and put it in. The man was a fisherman, and it was his favorite rod. You know, little things. But for the most part, there's not much room in a casket either, except for the person. And yet, between the womb and the tomb, we spend our time accumulating stuff. Lots of stuff. The great preacher Billy Graham once said, you'll notice that hearses don't have trailer hitches. We don't have a U-Haul that we drag behind it with all our possessions on our way to the gravesite, right? We can't. There's an old expression, you can't take it with you, and you can't. And yet we spend all of this time accumulating stuff. We hear the reading today about the rich young man, and we know everything in the gospel is important, but this must be really important because it appears in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. When all three of them have the story, you know somebody was trying to make a point. And it's a really important story. And he's a good young man. He's a fine young man, right? He's kept all the commandments. He's done everything he's supposed to. And yet, he says, "What do I lack?" And Jesus says, "Give up your stuff. Give up your stuff." I would ask, I wonder how many people miss church because they forgot their phone and went back for it. I see some of you smiling, right? I wonder how many people miss church because they're on their way here and they realize they forgot their phone. And it was more important to go back and get the phone than it was to come to church. I won't tell you whether I've ever done that or not, but but we're all about our possessions, aren't we? We fill our houses, we fill our garage, we buy storage containers. We have all of these things that until the very end, and any of you who have journeyed with an older parent or something, you go all through this divesting where all of a sudden it's just a bed and a room. Because that's what becomes important. This young man asked, "What must I do?" And Jesus says to him, "Give up your stuff. Let your stuff go. That's what you must do, and follow me." Now, there's been all kinds of arguments about what did that actually mean. Did he really mean give up everything? Did he really mean just give up your obsession with everything? What did that mean specifically? In fact, in the Eastern Rite, this man is named. If you go to the Eastern Rite, he actually does come back and does actually sell everything. We don't know what happens to him in our Christianity. But the Eastern Rite, they named him. They made him a saint. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, if any of you don't know who he is, he was the head of the Lutheran Church in Germany. And for years, even prior to World War II, he was preaching against cheap grace. He said, we can't make grace cheap. Grace is not supposed to be easy. And he proved it. He died in the death camps in 1945, just before the camp was released. He was one of the last people executed. And he says, cheap grace is where we look for these easy ways. And here he says, giving, tithing or giving a nice sum to the church, he says that's cheap grace. That's not giving it up. That's not giving it away. That's not letting go of it. And we need to let go of all those other things, not just our possessions, but our titles, all those things that we seem to lift us up, which really don't, because they all disappear in the grave. Walk through a cemetery. Do you know those people? No. Usually. You know your family? Do you know all the rest of the people? No. Because titles and property and all that doesn't mean anything. My brothers and sisters, we're called to give it up. Give it all up to God. Our lives, our possessions, and so on. Not necessarily give away, but give it up. Let go of our connection to those things, our obsession with those things, our need for those things, and realize that at the end of the day, when we're walking that last mile toward the tomb, the only thing we need is Christ. And throughout our lives, the only thing we need is Christ.